Welcome back to Lefner's Life Hacks. Today I'm going to talk about how I, the creator of Habitica, Lefner, use Habitica. And I'm not going to discuss too much about how to just use Habitica in general. I think you go to the website, you sign up, the onboarding process with its tutorial bubbles and whatnot, I think guide you enough through how to use the feature set. And I honestly don't think a lot of people are coming to this episode curious about how to use Habitica. I think they're curious about how to optimally use it, how to optimize their usage of it. So that will be my focus. In the spirit of this podcast system, which is things you may not have thought of, that will be my focus, is you may not have thought of the best way to use this system to truly optimize the improvement of your behavior. Because it's one thing to just sign up for the website, add a bunch of dailies and to-dos. It's another to really think about which features should you use to help you get better, to help you improve your behavior and your habits. For example, at a glance, and I'll talk about this more deeper into the episode, but just to give you a taste, I think the single most important feature on the website that is severely underutilized is custom rewards. Custom rewards, not digital rewards, not swords and shields, but treating yourself to a movie or an hour of gaming or some ice cream. I'll talk about why later. Now, real quick, let's talk about what is Habitica for anybody who doesn't know. It is a gamified habit tracker. So it is a task management system for you to track your habits and your dailies and your to-dos, just like things you might be familiar with things like Todoist and Asana and Notion and Workflowy. But it has a twist. It incentivizes your good behavior through a point system. So that's the rewards column. So there's 4 columns: habits, to-dos, dailies, and rewards. You use the rewards based on points you've earned from doing the good things in your life. You gain and you lose points. Now, it's significantly more complex than that. The whole thing is gamified. It's wrapped in a sort of theme of Super Nintendo 8-bit role-playing games. So it's in the spirit of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy. So you have a character, an avatar. This character can level up. When you do good things like you go to the gym, you gain experience points. Enough experience points levels you up. Eventually, you unlock this class system where you can be a warrior and a healer, a rogue, a mage. These classes specialize in different mechanics for interacting with your tasks. If you do bad things like you smoke a cigarette, you lose hit points. And if you lose enough hit points, your character dies, you lose a level, and so forth. So it's an extremely complex RPG-themed habit tracking system to help you improve your habits by introducing this notion of what you've earned and dopamine and pleasure. So it's a pleasure to go to the gym because then you get to cash that out for rewards later down the line. And then there's this whole deep system for making that feel immersive and more thoughtful. Now, high level, habits, dailies, to-dos, rewards. Those are the 4 columns. Habits are things you do any number of times per day consistently, like drinking water or drinking beer or smoking a cigarette. These can be both positive and negative. Dailies are things you want to do a specific number of times per day, like 8 hours of work or 1 trip to the gym or 20 minutes of meditation. To-dos are things you do once ever, like your taxes or the groceries. So not once ever, but once as far as this to-do list is concerned. And then rewards are the things that you use to reward yourself with the points you've earned by doing your good behaviors, and points which will have been lost in doing bad behaviors. Okay, so deep dive number 1. And this isn't quite as much a life hack as some of these other things I'll get into, but it's a good distinction to make. A lot of people have difficulty differentiating between dailies and habits. Now, a daily is something you do any number of times per day, and you want to meet that quota. So it may be once per day. That's the majority of the cases. Or it could be, let's say, 8 times per day. So example dailies, my personal dailies were plan for the day, take my medication, meditate for 20 minutes, exercise, journal, 1 hour of work-related reading, and then daily called work, just work. And dailies let you specify a checklist, and the amount of points you gain by completing a daily is, if a checklist is present, is only the percentage of points that the daily is worth based on the amount of checks you've checked off. So for work, the checklist, they don't have words. They're literally just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to about 14. And the reason for 14, I use a Pomodoro system for tracking my work. So it's 30 minutes of work or 25 minutes of work usually, and 5 minutes off. You take a 5-minute break, you come back. So I'm trying to track half-hour blocks to completion, as close to 8 hours as possible. That's by comparison to habits, which can happen or not any number of times per day. So if you're trying to quit smoking, every cigarette is a minus, and every glass of water is a plus, or every moment of gratitude is a plus. So positive habits are things you want to just do as often as you can, but you're not trying to meet some quota. And negative habits are things you really never want to do, but you want to track that you did it if you did it. So it's a very clear distinction. I think some obvious habits are going to be biting your nails, drinking water, eating healthy versus unhealthy food, gratitude practice, smoking, cigarettes, alcohol, maybe caffeine if you're trying to reduce that. So that's the difference between habits and dailies. It should be clear, but a lot of people struggle with it nonetheless. Think about it a little bit. It should become more clear over time. And we'll talk about a little bit more stuff in a bit. I think that'll help clear that up some more. But real quick, to-dos. To-dos are things you do once, like getting the groceries, doing your taxes, and then you check it off and it's done. Now, deep dive number 1. I recommend not using the to-do system on Habitica. I recommend using your own program, like Workflowy or Asana or Todoist, Remember the Milk, or Notion, whatever you prefer. And that's because the to-dos system in Habitica isn't really that robust. And of these 3 tasks, I find to-dos in particular need a little bit more robustness than the other ones need necessarily. Things like a calendaring system and email notification reminders and sharing it with your partners and whatnot. So I personally use Workflowy. I know a lot of people use Todoist. So rather than having any to-dos in the to-do column, I totally ignore that column, 0 to-dos in that column. I instead have a single daily called to-do. Once per day, I want to hit my to-dos, whether that's a half-hour block or just one hard to-do. So have a daily called to-dos. Now let's go back to the work daily and talk about Pomodoros. If you're a digital worker, if you work in technology, you're at your computer all the time, you would benefit significantly from something called Pomodoros, Pomodoro technique, Pomodoro. And this technique is 25 minutes on of work and 5 minutes off, a 5-minute break. And the reason it's called Pomodoros, the Pomodoro technique, is that whoever started this program used a timer to set this 25-minute timer, and it looks like a tomato. It's a tomato-looking timer, so Pomodoro timer. So every Pomodoro that I complete, and I was in the zone, and I was focused, and I didn't get distracted, in a 25-minute timer, I check one of the check boxes on the work daily, which has 14 check boxes. I take a break, 5-minute break, and I go to the bathroom, I go check my emails, I chat with my partner, whatever, and then I come back and work again. So I'm going to be building from like least interesting to most interesting sort of twists in the program. All right, habits. Here's something slightly more interesting that you may not be acquainted with. What I do for habits is there are things I'm trying to improve: drinking alcohol, caffeine intake, biting my nails, negative thoughts, just generally spiral out of control, too much stress, overwhelm, and whatnot. And then food. I want to eat good food and not eat bad food. The reason I paused there, stopped on food, is I think this is going to help you understand what I'm going to do with the rest of these habits. Using food as an example, it is both a positive and a negative, because with habits, you can either designate them as positive or negative or both. If you make a food habit and you allow it to be both positive and negative, anytime you eat a cookie, you hit the minus. Anytime you eat a salad, you hit the plus. What this allows you to do is take a beat before you do the bad version of something. Think about it, and then instead you do the good version of something. Now, it's very obvious, so let's make it a little less obvious, and let's go to coffee. I make all of my habits both positive and negative. Now, you might think, if I'm trying to quit caffeine, I should make coffee an only negative. But here's what I do. It's a both positive and negative habit. If I drink coffee, negative. But if I sit and think and I talk myself out of it successfully, and I walk away from the kitchen and back to the computer, then I hit the plus sign. So the positive version of all of these habits for me is mastery over the negative version of the habit. I'm going to spend some time here, and in fact, I'm going to do a whole episode dedicated to this concept. And this is mindfulness, by the way. I'm sure you're acquainted. This is mindfulness. this practice comes in all sorts of different forms, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. A lot of the behavioral therapies are some version of what I just described. In mindfulness, what you do is, in a moment, when you experience negative or positive, mindfulness is neutral. It applies all across the board, but let's talk about negative experiences for the moment. You have a craving. The mindfulness practice, rather than using discipline or strong arming yourself out of a situation, rather than saying, no, I will not drink coffee. I will not, I'm stronger than that, and you walk away. You don't do that. You pause. You do any number of meditative scans of the situation, assessing the situation. One practice is to scan your body. You think, what does it feel like right now to want coffee? Or why do I want coffee? Again, you're not trying to talk yourself out of it. Right now, you're just assessing the situation. Why do I want coffee? What is this feeling of fatigue? Does it come from being underslept? Or maybe I should exercise today? We're not trying to come up with solutions yet. We're simply assessing the circumstances. Where does it come from? What does it feel like in my body? What does it feel like in my head? What would happen if I drank coffee? What would that feel like? What would happen if instead I drank water? What would happen if I did nothing? Maybe you take a beat and you simply count your breath for 10 seconds. Or maybe you assess the financial consequences of drinking coffee. And this is a bad example with coffee. I should have used alcohol. Alcohol is a much better example because it has really like lasting long-term negative consequences and short-term negative consequences. But the practice of mindfulness is taking a moment to scan the circumstances. It's almost, if you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Toph puts her foot on the ground to assess the earth, to feel out who's in the room and where they're positioned, that's what this practice really is. You dig your heel into the ground and you pause time, you freeze the world, and you dissect the circumstances. You dissect your feeling in your body, your feeling in your mind. What does fatigue feel like? What if? What would be the consequence of yes? What would be the consequence of no? And then 10 seconds, 15 seconds later, you unfreeze time. That radial wave that was emitted from your body dissipates and everybody starts moving again. And 9 times out of 10, you didn't talk yourself out of it. You've just calmed your nervous system down sufficiently to not want it anymore. And sometimes you still want the thing. Sometimes you still want that coffee. No, screw it. I am really tired. Then you go ahead and you drink the coffee. And in that case, I hit the minus and the plus because I did the moment of mindfulness. I took the moment to assess the circumstances before taking the action. I took the beat. So that is my first true life hack in this episode is have all of your habits, which could be negative, also be positive. And in those times where you would do the negative habit, take a beat, be mindful, assess the situation, and then you either do it or you don't. And then you can use the plus and the minus accordingly. Now, you can take this a step further and you can have a single habit of all called mindfulness. And anytime you do anything you consider a negative habit in that moment, you minus. And anytime you take that beat and do that exercise, you plus. This makes it a little bit more manageable so you don't have 1,000 habits you're trying to track. But I personally like to see my progress in any given habit, how I'm doing with alcohol versus how I'm doing with caffeine and so forth. And so I like to have the habits be separate. I'm going to do a whole dedicated episode to that process I just described. I think I'm going to call the episode Attention is All You Need. I just described mindfulness. It's plain and simple. But I have a lot more to say on certain approaches and when to use it and why, and the downstream consequences. A way in which you can sort of two-bird, one-stone mindfulness moments like that to almost account for that 20 minutes of meditation that they recommend per day for better wellness. You can sort of accumulate enough of these micro moments over the course of a day to really exercise that muscle, what's called the task forward network of the brain, and gain some of the same benefits you would gain if you did the formal practice of meditation for 20 minutes every day. Very good. Let's move on to rewards. Okay, this to me is the most important point of this episode. custom rewards. Now, the system, Habitica, the whole point of the thing is that it's a gamified habit tracker. You cash out your points for these digital rewards and you get this dopamine drip, the experience of earning a sword, and then that sword deals more damage and gains you more points and all sorts of mechanics, or armor, which defends you more from bad habits doing damage to your character. And that's fine and well. But eventually, those are really the training wheels that ease you into the system of earning things because of your good behavior. Eventually, you want to graduate to custom rewards. And this is the thing I feel most strongly about. So I like to, when I talk about this topic, I like to say, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You may have heard that saying before. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, D-U-L-L. If you're putting too much effort into your behavior improvements and you're not reaping any real benefits, the pleasures, the spice of life, your guilty pleasures and the things that you enjoy in life, then what's the point? What are you gaining from this system truly? I think I've seen burnout in people who use Habitica, and it's interesting. It's not burnout of the app, like they got bored of it. It's burnout in that they push themselves too hard. They have improved their behaviors too rigorously. They've focused too much on the systems of fixing their patterns and their bad things. And in exchange, their reward for that is swords and shields and pets. Their reward is dopamine, not real pleasure, not real joy. I think this type of utilization of Habitica can lead to perfectionism, anxiety, burnout, and dare I say, I want to go so far as to say existentialism. Like, what's the purpose? What's the point of it all? Now, I'm not dogging the digital reward system. I think it is fantastic training wheels. But let's say once you've got good enough gear to really stat your character out, ultimate defense against bad habits, and ultimate damage against dailies and bosses and whatnot, I think it's time to take the training wheels off and flesh out your rewards column. Now, the rewards I like are 1 hour of video games. I love VR personally. An hour of reading, some junk food, an episode of TV. And for reference, I have 10 gold for reading for 30 minutes, 15 gold for junk food, 30 gold for one TV episode, and 75 gold for 1 hour of gaming. But don't fixate on that. It's just if you want a point of reference. The thing is, you're going to have more or less dailies and habits than I have. You're going to be higher or lower level than I am. And the level does impact the amount of gold you gain. And your class, specifically, if you're a rogue, you gain a lot of gold. So the gold system overall is meaningless. It has to be based on your own experience. What does it look like the amount of gold you have left over of a really good day is on average? Maybe make a full day's worth of gold equate 2 hours of video games, that kind of a deal. Now, these are the things we enjoy in life. These are the things that bring life joy. I call them pleasures, as opposed to guilty pleasures. Because if you don't use a system whereby you've earned your pleasures, then they'll make you guilty. They'll make you feel guilty, and you will call them guilty pleasures. And so what I see commonly is that people will buy their swords and shields, and yet they'll play an hour of video games off the record, out of the gold system, and feel guilty. Gaming should be a pleasure, a well-earned, well-deserved pleasure that you cash out your points for, giving you reason for gaining the points in the first place. And so if through the course of a day you're doing hard things that you maybe don't enjoy doing, like going to the gym, but in your mind you know that that's because at the end of the day you have earned X, Y, or Z, it makes the whole thing much more enjoyable. And that was the whole point of gamification. So use those digital rewards as long as it takes to graduate them as training wheels and into the system of custom rewards, and use those custom rewards every single day without miss. As often as you can, you use those custom rewards unless you make a custom reward which is exorbitantly expensive, like buying something expensive that you want to like save up for but also feel good about buying. Then you can ration these points and get a little bit more strategic and whatnot. But overall, I want you to use those custom rewards much, much more often than the digital rewards. This system I'm presenting brings balance. It presents the notion of balance to your life. The thing that I think a lot of people miss when they use Habitica is balance. I think they can get a little bit too draconian, too hardcore on themselves in their habit improvement and not get the payout that they deserve. And so they lack balance. And then on the other end of the spectrum are people who do these guilty pleasures all day long without balance, without having earned it in the first place. And what happens? They feel terrible about themselves. You look at somebody who plays video games all day long, and a lot of times deep down, these people are really, they're thrashing themselves inwardly. And I really think a system, Habitica or no, doesn't matter what you use, but you do some good things and thereby you've earned the payout. You know, a nice beer at the end of a long day. And what Habitica does is it allows you to think of it that way, as a nice beer at the end of a long day, as opposed to, oh, well, I shouldn't be drinking this right now. And actually, let's talk about that. Okay, rewards or habits? Beer, cigarette, coffee. Some of these things would be considered bad habits. Cigarettes should absolutely be considered bad habits. So that one you should mark as a bad habit, no matter what. But some of them might be something you consider the spice of life, a well-earned reward, a pleasure. A very good example of that is alcohol. Now, I'm not going to say one way or another whether you should be drinking alcohol in this episode. But to some people, alcohol is something they would have a hard time doing without. And if they drink moderately, and if it's not impacting their life, and they like a good beer with their friends on a Saturday night, then hey, they deserve it. So the delineator between bad habit versus reward is totally up to you. The question you should ask yourself is, does this thing negatively impact my life? Is it imposing upon my life like alcohol can do, has a tendency to do? If yes, it should be a bad habit and you should mark it as such. If no, and you don't have a problem with it, then make it a reward. Okay, next tip. Respect the colors. Respect the colors. Now, the whole point of building this app in the first place, based on that spreadsheet that came from the Life Hacker recommendation, was a color-coded system. And a red habit or a red daily means that you haven't been keeping up with it or you've been doing poorly at it. And a green habit or daily means you've been doing great at it. Now, these colors indicate how strongly the points will impact your character. And that is for a reason. The more green a habit or a daily becomes, it becomes blue ultimately. And that gives you significantly less points for accomplishing. And it hurts you significantly less if you miss it. Then something which is all the way down towards the red, things which are deep red, are going to hurt you a lot more. You'll lose a lot more hit points when you miss that daily or when you do that bad habit. And you'll gain a lot more points when you do the daily or you do the good version of that habit. You stand a lot to lose and to gain from the things you're slipping up on. And that's there for a reason. The point is to get you to focus on the areas of your life that are lacking. So me, for example, when I was using Habitica, I had no problem going to the gym, kind of a gym rat. I had every problem working on taxes during taxes season. I had a daily called taxes rather than a to-do because my taxes are complex enough that I have to do it over the course of 2 weeks or so. So my taxes daily was always red and my gym daily was always blue. The system there is in place to encourage me to ease up on the gym and focus that resource instead on what needs doing, my taxes. Now, this goes hand in hand with a feature of the site called streaks and perfect day bonuses. In Habitica, if you do dailies multiple days in a row, you get streak bonuses. And if you do all your dailies on the list, then you will get a perfect day bonus. Now, I totally dislike that feature. I absolutely dislike that feature. I think Habitica should help people in the pursuit of their bigger goals and bigger character developments. We all need to be a little bit more well-rounded. What I find is that when people focus on a palette of dailies that they can accomplish to perfection every day, then they're not challenging themselves enough. They have on their list things they know they can do every day without that much pain. And so I think a healthier system of dailies is a list of dailies where some of them tend sometimes to dip into the yellows and the reds. And that tells you it's time to ease up on the greens and the blues because you can, because the point system allows it. You don't have to worry today about those greens and blues because if you miss them, they won't hurt you that much. But you stand a lot to gain by doing some of those yellows and those reds. So what I commonly saw in people who were really geared towards the streak system and perfect day bonuses and all their dailies were blue was this. They had a daily for waking up, and then a daily for drinking a glass of water, and then a daily for taking their medication, and then a daily for brushing their teeth. And they just kept it simple, there's no shame in that, but to maximize the value of this system, you should be truly challenging yourself. And in order to truly challenge yourself, you have to embrace the principle of good enough. So let me list out my dailies right now. I have journal for a half hour. I have to take my medications. I just do that to remind myself. Plan the day, 8 hours of work, a half hour of catching up on emails, LinkedIn, and text messages, a half hour of to-dos, 1 hour of working on my side project Nothi, a half hour of catching up on my finances, and a half hour of reading complex books, things in programming and artificial intelligence and such. Now, it's very rare that I accomplish all these dailies. It's not because I don't have enough hours in the day. I could feasibly fit all these into the day. It's that I don't have enough energy or gusto by the end of the day to have accomplished all of these things. And it is my absolute intent that 2 of these at least are unchecked every day. I want to challenge myself so much by putting very complex tasks on there, but which will significantly move the needle in my journey of accomplishing life's goals, that it's worth taking a hit from time to time. I want to embrace the principle of good enough. And in so doing, I'm actually taking very large strides towards my goals. Because if I embrace the principle of perfectionism, of doing everything I can every day, I'm not going to be doing bigger things. Furthermore, this color coding system teaches you self-compassion and self-forgiveness, because if you missed a day on the blues, if I go to the gym every day and it's blue and I just decide not to go today, I can very thoroughly forgive myself for missing a day at the gym. I don't have to go every day. And over time, you can learn to truly forgive yourself for your shortcomings because you know you're trying your best. You know you're trying your best on the big ticket items and you're just trying to keep up. And I think that that's a lesson that you internalize over time that really helps you with self-forgiveness and self-compassion because you know you're doing your best. So I think that this whole point that I'm making here is going to be the toughest pill to swallow for most people who use Habitica. I know a lot of people who use it and try to get those perfect day streak bonuses. And so if you're in that camp, I challenge you thus. I challenge you to add one more daily that is very difficult to accomplish, but not for difficult sake, not for its own sake of being hard. Something that moves the needle in your life's journey towards the goals you ultimately want to accomplish, but you know you're avoiding because it may be a big bite to chew. Something related to your finances or your continuing education or a move towards a career change or whatever the case may be, something difficult. And in order to do that, the second part of the challenge is to purposefully miss 1 blue every day, or 2, or 3, to make room for that hot ticket item. I challenge you to never complete a perfect day. Okay, I think that's the last of my tips. I do have a class calculator, which will help you decide which class to choose for your avatar. And I'm going to link that. It's in my blog. It's not going to be part of the show notes, but I'll link in the show notes to this blog post with the class calculator. It will help you decide if you want to be a mage, a warrior, a rogue, or a healer based on your preferred lifestyle. A total cheat, maybe you'll be mad at me for telling you this, but a total cheat is to be a warrior, put all of your stats into intelligence, not strength or constitution, and to use brutal smash on those reds to give yourself a little bit of leeway or self-forgiveness, or to do incredibly high damage to bosses. And one last thing, I think I have mentioned this in this episode. I don't use Habitica anymore. I created a new program called Nothi AI, GNOTHAI.com, Nothi AI. And it's primarily a robo journal. It's an AI-based journal. You journal every day. You know, today was really rough. My boss yelled at me and stuff. And it gives you book recommendations to read. And you can have conversations with the chat bot. It will give you summaries of all your journal entries over a period of time and themes that keep coming up and whatnot. But there's a tab on the website that I built called, it's the Behaviors tab. It's a second feature of the website. And I intend to make it feature parity with Habitica without the gamification on purpose. I intend that the Behaviors tab will be totally, intentionally, only points, habits, dailies, to-dos, and rewards, where the rewards column can only be custom rewards that you earn through the points you gain from the other three columns. And like I said, part of me feels that the digital assets gamification angle of Habitica sort of got away from itself and detracted from the meaningful aspects of it, namely the custom rewards system. But also, because I no longer work at Habitica, this allows me the opportunity to build in some more complex and nuanced mechanics that I always wished were in Habitica. One being that the dailies and habits can be a little bit more merged. You can have any number of things you want to try to accomplish per day, but every bit counts. And there's like quota and reset periods. But most importantly, because it's an AI first project, is that it has correlation analysis. So it can show you which of your tasks are correlated with which other of your tasks, including data-only entries like your weight or your mood or your sleep quality. So one thing I use this for is I track my sleep and my mood, and I will look at my mood and it will tell me that going to the gym and eating healthy and not drinking alcohol and so forth are impacting it, and in what order, what percentage each one contributes to the impact on my sleep. And I found this very interesting because, in particular, in sleep, the thing that impacts my sleep the most is the number of Pomodoros. So what that tells me is that when I go to sleep feeling like I haven't accomplished X, Y, or Z, presumably the rumination of my brain is keeping me up and making it challenging to get to sleep. So some of these insights that I'm able to build into Nothi's behavior tracking system, because I have the flexibility to do it because it's my own project, I have found very valuable. And one other takeaway from that system is it has seemed to confirm for me a lot of these theories that I have, that focusing on some of these bigger ticket items like respecting the colors improves things in my life in a pretty significant fashion. So things that I have trouble doing frequently and tend towards the color red, it has the color coding system as well. When I do them, it shows those as having had a significant impact on my sleep and my mood. And the use of custom rewards indeed corroborates with my theory that keeps your moods high, your wellness high, because my mood behavior is significantly impacted by the cashing out of these custom rewards. So if you're interested, go to nothiai.com. It's just a different spin on some of this gamification. It won't have the art and the RPG elements. It's just raw task management and points cash out for rewards. So to sum everything up, some of these tips and tricks for usage: use dailies. You want to track any number of times per day up to a quota. When using habits, these are things you do any number of times per day, but there is no quota. Typically, these tend towards negative habit tracking, but you can track positive habits like gratitude exercises and whatnot. If you have negative habits, add the plus button. Add the plus button, and what you do is, if you did the bad thing, like drinking alcohol or smoking a cigarette, you hit the minus. But if you took a beat and you scanned the circumstances, use mindfulness to assess what it's like to feel this way, or why is it that I want this, and what could I do instead? You take 10, 15 seconds to freeze time and go through that exercise, then you hit the plus. You hit the plus and you gain a point. And maybe you fail anyway and you drink the coffee, you drink the alcohol, then you hit the minus. So it gives you flexibility to flex the muscle and self-forgiveness to do the thing if you must, nonetheless. When it comes to to-dos, I just recommend using an off-site system because the to-dos system of Habitica isn't robust enough. I personally use Workflowy. I highly recommend it. Others like Notion, others like Todoist. Lean into those custom rewards. The most important statement of this entire podcast episode, truly, as soon as you can, get off those digital rewards and start treating yourself to life's pleasures, life's joys, so that you feel that all that work in that behavior improvement that you're putting in through the course of a day has a true payoff, makes life worth it. That these things should be enjoyed. You should be enjoying video games and movies and art and books and ice cream. We're not meant to be perfect. We're human. We're meant to enjoy life. But in order to enjoy life most optimally, you should earn it. That's the whole point of the system. You should have no guilty pleasures. You should only have pleasures. And the way that you accomplish that is by earning your guilty pleasures. And respect the colors. Focus on the reds and yellows. Ease up on the blues and greens. They're not going to hurt you. And in fact, I challenge you to refactor your dailies column such that it is near impossible to get a perfect streak. Really start focusing on moving the needle in your life towards the accomplishment of your hot button goals. And in order to do that, you're really going to have to challenge yourself in a way that really doesn't have much room for perfectionism. If you want to know which class you should pick, go ahead and click the link to my class calculator. And if you want to follow my journey in creating a little bit more of a similar solution to Habitica, but more tailored towards my theories in how to really optimize towards improved behavior and wellness, then go check out notheai.com. I'll see you in the next episode.